The first episode of 009, Birth, named for my most prevalent fetish, opens with 009 waking up on an operating table, unaware of how he got there or why his body feels so weird. It's a much more cinematic opening than we got in the manga. In fact, one of my biggest criticisms of the manga is its slow pacing. We're introduced to every cyborg, we see how they got captured, we get a huge wall of text explaining who the Black Ghost is, and it's all unnecessary, honestly. I feel like this happens because in Ishinomori's 60s works, he was taking more influence from science fiction novels. However, by the 1970s, Ishinomori would master the art of the page turner, and in 1971's Kamen Rider, the first page opens up with, just like in this show, Takeshi Hongo on an operating table with a single speech bubble explaining that he's been captured by Shocker. How'd he get there? Well, we turn the page and bam, he was riding his motorcycle and he got hit by a car. I attribute this shift in Ishinomori's writing to him having years of experience writing for films and television by this time. Now, this might be a controversial argument since the first 4 chapters of the 009 manga weren't included in the initial serialization. These chapters were written 6 months later in January of 1965, but have been included in almost every other release of the series. As the scientists panic over 009 waking up unexpectedly, we see our first glimpse of the series' main antagonist, the Skull, though there is some contention over his name. The dub refers to him as the Black Ghost, suggesting that the organization is just named for him, that they just share the same name. At the beginning of the manga, this appears to be the case as well, with lines like, the Black Ghost himself. However, later on, it would be clarified that the Black Ghost is just the name of the organization, and that the character is named Sukaru. This is most likely the Japanese rendering of Skull, since the character has a skull motif. But like Van Vogt, this name has plagued almost every translation in the West. The Tokyo Pop release of the manga calls him Scar. The American 009 comic calls him Sakar. The Discotheque release of the series calls him Scarl. The only time I can think of where his name was translated correctly was in the Cyborg 009 vs. Devilman OVA, so thank you, Netflix.
Oh, strange. If Skull were to have any interest in it, well then...
And this dub also got Van Vogt's name right.
The Vogt Program, a private research institution led by Van Vogt.
I love the Skull's appearance here as a giant transparent hologram. It makes him feel so much more important and intimidating than his manga appearance, where he's almost dancing around the panels. But I guess that makes sense since he was inspired by a 40s serial villain. The 2001 anime, on the other hand, portrays him more like Darth Vader, which I think is actually really fitting. Star Wars hadn't come out at the time 009 was initially published, but after 1977, it would become one of the most referenced films in Ishinomori's works, right up there with Planet of the Apes and West Side Story. Also, the Skull is voiced by Norio Wakamoto, who has voiced some of the most intimidating anime villains like Cell from Dragon Ball Z and Chiyo's dad from Azumanga Daioh.
Hello, everyone! How are you? Fine, thank you.
Oh my god!
I wish I were a bird.
009 hears a voice in his head explaining that, well, he's Cyborg 009, and that he has to escape. The voice belongs to 001, who telepathically guides 009 through an escape plan that involves fighting robots, guys in tanks, jet fighters, all the while becoming more acquainted with his new powers. The sheer variety of enemies 009 has to face and the pacing of the scenes really gives you a sense of the Black Ghost scale. All of these enemies appear in the 79 anime and the manga, but they all attack at once because in those interpretations, 009 isn't escaping, he's just being tested by Black Ghost before being introduced to the other cyborgs. Now, I will acknowledge that in the 2001 anime, 001 does tell 009 that he's leading him into these enemies to test his power, and you could feasibly argue that this devalues my point about the pacing emphasizing the immense scale of the Black Ghost. I would like to hear your opinion on it, so if you disagree, feel free to meet me on Knife Fight Island and say it to my face. 009 sees the ocean, which triggers a flashback of how he ended up in this situation. Apparently, he was being chased by the cops, and then shouts that he didn't kill the priest before jumping into the ocean. This is another change from the manga, done as a result of the change of time period. 009's real name is Joe Shimomura, and he was born to a Japanese mother and father of unknown nationality. All that's known about his father is that he was a foreigner, and it's speculated that he was an American. During the American occupation of Japan, it wasn't uncommon for American soldiers to have children with Japanese women, only to abandon them when they returned to the States. Joe's mother died shortly after giving birth to him, and he spent most of his youth growing up in an orphanage. Once he was of age, he was forced out of the system and told to get a job and take care of himself. However, due to his mixed race heritage, especially his light-colored hair, he was unable to get a job, and was forced to join up with a group of delinquents. This eventually gets him sent to a juvenile detention facility, and it's while breaking out of this facility that he's captured by Black Ghost. This backstory was used in the 79 version of the show. If you're wondering how they handled his backstory in the 60s cartoon, well, they dyed his hair black and made him a race car driver. They calls him Hurricane Joe, everyone loves him. 009 is eventually saved by 002, who tells Joe to stop making so much noise or he'll drop him. Already, the differing characterization shows here. Remember that in the manga, this is the same guy who went out of his way to milk a goat to feed a baby. 002 introduces 009 to the other 00 cyborgs, all of whom are in the process of escaping. Although it isn't revealed at the time, 002's real name is Jet Link. This name has a few different meanings behind it. Jet was a gangster from New York's West Side, as an homage to West Side Story.
ウエストサイド。ああ、この吸えた匂いがたまんねえな。
And the gang from West Side Story is called the Jets. Fun fact though, the rival gang in West Side Story is called the Sharks. And although Jet's rival gang doesn't get a name in the manga, they do appear in the 79 show, and their name in that is the Black Sharks. Also, Jet's full name is Jet Link, as an homage to James Dean's character from the movie Giant, Jet Rink. This is where 009 finds out that 001 is actually a baby. He talks using telepathy since he isn't old enough to speak yet. Or at least that's what he says in the manga when Ishinomori couldn't predict the longevity of the series. This scene gives us an introduction into the cyborgs. 003 is the only girl, and her power is enhanced sight, along with X-ray vision, and super hearing. Her name is Francois Arnold, named for the actress of the same name, and she's frankly the most bland of the group. People tend to look at stuff like this and call it sexism when there's only one female and she's the least interesting. I think that's a bit pessimistic. I believe that because of Ishinomori's relationship with his sister and how the series was published only a few years after her death, Ishinomori probably saw a bit of his sister in the character, and as a result wound up making her a bit too perfect. I'll back this claim up with saying that he never really puts her in any sexual positions, which is notable because from the 1970s onward, Ishinomori got super horny. 004 is named for this guy, and he has a machine gun in his hand as well as a blade that runs down his arm, plus a rocket launcher in his knee, which is awesome as fuck. 005 is Geronimo Jr., referred to as G Jr. in the 2001 series, to avoid any allegations of racism over the name Geronimo. I think that's a bit unnecessary though, since Geronimo is an actual Native American name. I don't think it's any more stereotypical than Cho Chang. 006 is named Chang Changu. I don't think it's any more stereotypical than Cho Chang. 006 is named Chang Changu, and he literally only benefited by being kidnapped, because before he got kidnapped, he was just going to kill himself. His power is breathing fire, and they mentioned that his nickname is the Mole, which I thought was a weird statement until I read the manga and found out that most of the cyborgs have nicknames related to their powers. 004 is the Shinigami, while 008 is Merman, which in my opinion is more offensive than the blackface. 007 is named Great Britain. He can transform into anything and is incredibly overpowered. Also, he's British because he's 007. Get it, like Hercules? 008 is Punma. His power is super swimming, which I give Ishinomori the benefit of the doubt that he did not know the stereotype that black people can't swim. And I will be giving out a lot of benefits today. According to the book 009 a la carte, which details the planning notes for the series, Ishinomori considered naming 008 Savannah, Kilimanjaro, and Sambo before deciding on Punma. Sambo being a reference to Little Black Sambo, a character whose depiction became highly controversial in the later end of the 20th century. Though just as a reminder, Japan was far less aware of the cultural insensitivity associated with this design, and even a mangaka like Akira Toriyama considered naming a character Black Sambo, and then he did it. After defeating the soldiers, the cyborgs are attacked by saucer drones that latch onto their faces and inject them with paralyzing fluid. When one targets 003, 009 uses his acceleration device to destroy them. Joe's accelerated movements are shown by turning the screen blue, as everyone around him appears frozen in time. This effect is used early on in the series, but is later replaced by a black background with shining streaks of light to indicate speed. This was probably done to avoid having to draw backgrounds, especially since he's moving so quickly, but I still wish it came back more often. In the concept trailer for the series, when Joe uses his accelerator, you could actually hear a stopwatch clicking in the background, which I thought was a really cool idea but never made it into the actual show. The saucers combined into one metallic robot, which Joe easily takes out by shooting it in the heart, which all robots have despite never being able to love. The cyborgs begin making their way to the aircraft hangar, while 007 turns into a mouse to sneak ahead of everyone. Before they can reach the hangar, the cyborgs are trapped and confronted by the Black Ghost scientists that converted them into cyborgs. In the 2001 anime, this scene is set with the cyborgs trapped beneath a glass ceiling, a position that many of us gamers are familiar with. In the 60s film and 79 show, they play the scene closer to the manga, where the doctors and cyborgs go outside to introduce themselves, only for the cyborgs to then reveal that they're actually betraying them. Turns out that one of the doctors is actually 007 in disguise, and he takes Dr. Isaac Gilmore hostage. The cyborgs use the hostage to make their way to the aircraft hangar and escape. As shown earlier, Black Ghost doesn't have a problem shooting their own men, so Gilmore announces that the cyborgs have entered the self-destruct code for the base, and only he has the code to deactivate it. The cyborgs escape the base, and 009 accepts his role on the team. The execution of this in the anime is pretty cool too, since the opening has a moment where the singer says 009 dramatically, so it's played in a way where we hear Joe say, "I am." Then the OP, which is used as the ending in the first episode, starts up, concluding the sentence with 009.
そうさ。だから君は
僕は
You've got the chance to express you.
Here's another fun fact. In anime, the next episode preview usually comes after the ending credits, in order to get viewers to tune in for another commercial break that's played between the ending and the preview. When anime was aired on Toonami though, this didn't matter, so they usually moved the next episode preview to play right after the end of the episode. In the case of 009 though, it created a weird instance where this happens.
If that's the designation, then I must be.
From now on, that's how you'll be known.
My name is Cyborg 009. I've been surgically altered and given powers I never dreamed I could have.
Episode 2 opens with a flashback of Joe discovering the priest with a knife in his chest while the church is covered in fire. Firemen break in and see Joe, which leads to him being arrested, even though firemen can't arrest people, only fires. But after a car accident, Joe escapes, leading into the flashback from earlier that ends with him being found by the Black Ghost operatives. Dr. Gilmore removes his evil eyes, which are apparently sunglasses, and we learn that he's working with the cyborgs to help them escape. We also learn that 007 was previously an actor. Over the next couple episodes, we're slowly given hints and shown flashbacks of the cyborgs' lives before they were captured, and it all comes off very naturally. Much more naturally than the prologue chapters of the manga, at least. I'm very bitter about those. Black Ghost sends out a fleet of fighters called the Black Aces. The cyborgs said earlier that they have no intention of taking unnecessary lives, but luckily these are drones, so they obliterate them without regard. After this, the cyborgs crash land on Island X, a secret Black Ghost base where Gilmore says they'll meet up with other Black Ghost defectors. There's a transition here that cuts out a big part that's in the manga, but a lot of the information in that scene from the manga was delivered when Joe meets the other cyborgs, so it works perfectly. The scene reveals that 006 is a cook, and working its way to the top of scenes that haven't aged well is where he explains that he's making a traditional Cantonese dish of cooked bat. 006 is voiced by Hirotaka Shimazawa, known by his stage name Charufurin, and according to Wikipedia, he's known for voicing characters that are fat and ugly.
カンボジア料理を中華風にアレンジしてみたよ。
みんな勘違いしてる。こっちが現実、そっちがアニメの世界。
Dr. Gilmore explains that, like him, the defectors are doctors who were deceived into joining Black Ghost, and once they were part of the organization, they were unable to leave. It's not said explicitly here, but Gilmore himself believed that the cyborgs were willing test subjects, and that it was part of a venture to create supermen that would improve human life. Black Ghost drops bombs on the base, but everyone makes it out fine. They decide to split up, so I'm not sure why they didn't just have the cave-in split them up intentionally, instead of just, coming out of the stones free and then deciding to split up. It just seems a little odd, but what do I know? Gilmore team discovers the Black Phantom, an advanced warship being developed by Black Ghost, but then Dr. Ryan shows up and reveals that all the scientists they were coming there to save have been killed, including him. The team winds up fighting a bunch of robots, which mostly just keeps you up to speed on everyone's powers, since 9 unique abilities can be a lot to retain. I think the fight scene here has a lot more weight than it does in the manga, and I lend that to the art style. The anime uses Ishinomori's later art style as the basis over the art style used when he started the series. His older art was much more closer to Osamu Tezuka's cartoony style, which I think clashes with the manga's serious tone at points. I feel like the points where this art style fits the most are usually the scenes where he's making up something to accommodate the Toei film, which he hated. Ironically, the character that's changed the least is 007, and I say that's ironic because his design is based off the Blackjack character Acetylene Lamp. I should note here that this fight introduces one of the most interesting aspects of Joe's accelerator, which is that he can't interact with living things while he's in his accelerated mode, or the stress could easily kill them. Commander Scar tells the Skull that he wants to blow up the island, and Skull approves. Joe discovers this secret throne room, and we get our first interaction between Joe and the Skull, where Skull kills Commander Scar, and then tells 009 that he'll join him soon at the bottom of the sea. He has this outstanding delivery that goes from sly and wicked to maniacal in a heartbeat.
こんな簡単に仲間を償いだよ。お前たちにも支払ってもらうさ。高くついた性能テストの代償もな。海の木図と切る009!
The island explodes and the cyborgs escape in the Black Phantom, closing out the episode and the first arc of the series. My biggest criticism is that you do lose a lot of the historical context by setting the series in the modern era, especially a lot of the context surrounding the main character himself, 009. So even though I do recommend the 2001 anime for casual viewers, and I do think it's one of the best adaptations of the series, I still think that if you really want to understand the characters fully, you should read the manga. My second big criticism is that this is an early digital show, so the quality of episodes and the art and the animation all tend to fluctuate, and they never tend to be perfect. Episode 2 in particular has some really blurry backgrounds and scenes, and in later episodes you'll even see things like the background just not being aligned correctly. In the concept trailer, they recreated some scenes using CG, which may have been planned early on to incorporate into the show, but I'm glad it isn't, because I hate the way that early CG looks. I'd honestly rather have them try their best to draw something and get these errors with like the blurry background than to put a whole CG giant statue in front of my face. And that concludes the first arc of Cyborg 009 Birth. Join us next time for The Assassins.